Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate you all joining us tonight. It's beautiful outside, so I'm sure that was difficult being here. So it is sincerely appreciated, believe me. And I am Jason Tress with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. I'm the project manager on behalf of the RPC for this project. I also have my coworker Brian Davis here tonight and your planner Adele. I just want to wave to the audience. They're going to be helping me out tonight. We have also had assistance through our hired consultant for this project, Dubois and King, who is not here tonight, but they have provided materials for us to present to y'all. And I have a slideshow that we're going to run through. So if you give me a moment, I will get that shared so y'all can see it. And actually, before I do that, a couple just housekeeping things. The slideshow itself is maybe 16 slides. It shouldn't take more than maybe 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes to get through. If you could hold your questions till the end, I think that would be helpful, because as is usually the case, questions come up that will get answered later in the presentation. But if you feel like you're going to forget your question, please just toss it into the chat. Should see a chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Just click that button, and if possible, we'll maybe try to address it in real time. But if that doesn't happen, we'll circle back to them at the end when we just open it wide open for comments, questions, and discussion. Okay. Any questions before we get going? All right. It's either a good sign or you guys are just waiting. We'll see. Okay, can somebody give me a nod or a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Okay. And we'll make this big. There you go. Okay, tonight is our second community forum for what we're calling the Walk and Bike Connectivity Study. And just a little background on, what this study is and how it came to be. Oh, excuse me, one moment. Forgot to shut off the baby monitor before starting, so didn't want that distraction going on in the background. So thanks for pardoning that interruption. So yeah, as I was saying, a little background on what this study is and how it came to be. When we started out, I think we were initially looking at a study that was going to focus on gaps and come up with new studies or new ideas for the town to pursue. And once we started really kind of sitting down with town officials and talking about what Shelburne has done, it kind of became clear that there was kind of more of a need to kind of pull together all the different plans and try to come up with a prioritized list so that the town could focus a little bit more on moving projects forward to fruition and getting things implemented. So the name itself of this study, we kept it the same. It's probably a little bit misleading, so just wanted to put that out there for everyone's understanding. So what we've done with this study is we have looked at all the past studies that we could get our hands on and pulled out recommendations from those studies. There was also a survey that was issued as part of the first community forum, which I think was just a couple months ago in March. where we asked a series of questions to try to tease out people's preferences on kind of value-related questions, and we'll get to those in a little bit. And then we also did some analysis and put those all together, and that is where we're at with this study. In terms of the process that we're at, we are at that bold circle there, public review. That's the second community forum. So we're nearing the end of this study. And from here, we're going to take your feedback and make some further revisions and put together a draft report and eventually bring it before the select board, hopefully in the maybe late June, July timeframe. Okay. Each project that we have that we've pulled out of the synthesis of all the reports that we looked through was given a score based on for each of these 7 criteria, and then those scores were also weighted. The criteria that you see in yellow, so transportation, recreation, connectivity, maintenance, complexity, those were criteria that were part of the survey that was issued, and that survey garnered just over 100 responses. I think it was around 105. And so those criteria were part of that survey effort, and we used that survey to come up with weights. And you can kind of get a sense of the weights, and I'll get into it further in the following 7 slides. We're going to walk through each of these. But you can kind of get a sense of what the weights are based on the size of the circle. Okay. And the other 2 circles that you see are safety and project readiness. Safety was something that we didn't ask specifically about because I think everyone can hopefully agree that safety is kind of a paramount criteria. And so we just assigned it a value or a weight rather, and scored it as we felt appropriate. And I'll go through that, how that was done in just a little bit. And then the last one, the project readiness, that received the largest of weights, that was a criteria that was added following the conversation that we had at the last advisory committee meeting. When we were talking through that meeting, it kind of became clear that we missed the mark a little bit here, and we needed something else to help round these out. So once all these 7 criteria are scored and weighted, those all get combined to form a project score, and then we use those project scores to rank the projects from, you could say, most important to least important, or most ready to implement and to least ready. But we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a bit. So first up, we have safety. And for this, project scored more points, the more separation the idea or recommendation had from the roadway. So separated shared use path got more points for an on-road bike lane, for example. And paths or sidewalks that were along roadways that had a high crash experience were also given more points. And the same goes for roadways that have high traffic volumes. So Route 7, for instance, the high traffic volume there, if there's a project that was along that roadway, it more than likely got the maximum amount of points available. And then the weight on this criteria was high because, as I mentioned earlier, we felt it was a paramount goal for any public investment to improve the active transportation network. Next up, we have recreation. Projects that access Shelburne's either parks or trails scored more points for this criteria than those that didn't. Um, it also got more points if you were separated from the roadway, kind of similar to safety criteria. And when we asked the survey, or when we distributed the survey, the questions were arranged such that we kind of put recreation and transportation against each other. This was done purposefully to try to tease out if people felt that one was more important than the other. And the result of that is that um, we did not determine that people felt that one use was more important than the other, so we gave them equal importance. And so those were weighted as being normal. So none of these scores are inflated or deflated based on their recreation or transportation score. For transportation, if you were had a destination, so if a sidewalk was proposed to be built and it was going to end at a school or a place of business or any sort of shopping center, if you will, it was given more points in that situation. And on the other end of a trip, if the sidewalk started at a dense residential area, that received more points. And then again, as mentioned on the previous slide, this criteria was received a normal weighting. Maintenance, the survey results, people were not as interested in maintaining projects as they were building new ones. I guess this is, we're trying to think up a house analogy. It's almost like people were more interested in an addition than redoing their kitchen or bathroom. And so if there was a new facility, excuse me, a really loud motorcycle going by. Hopefully you can't hear that too much. If there was a new facility, it received more points as opposed to a project that was going to enhance or expand or kind of rebuild an existing facility. And then the weight of this was a little bit lower weighting because people were more interested in expanding the network versus making improvements to the existing. Complexity. When the results came in, this is sort of intuitive, but most people were, or more people I should say, were interested in implementing projects versus waiting and trying to navigate through a complex, maybe expensive project that required property acquisition or lots of permitting. So more points were given for those projects that sort of didn't have these hurdles to overcome and were low cost and in theory easier to move forward to fruition. So if and then the weight for this criteria is a lower weighting. The weight on this criteria, connectivity, is high. People were definitely interested in projects that closed gaps. And so this criteria was given a higher weight than some of the others. And in the actual scoring, as if it closed the gap, it received more points. And then if it connected to Shelburne's, we have here identified growth area, but basically the village or the area or outside the village, if it connected to that, it received more points. I think this is the last criteria, is project readiness. So if a project had been part of a previous public planning process, such as this one, for instance, or a previous scoping study, it was given more points. And the weight on this, this received our highest weight. And I think I mentioned earlier, this was added following the discussion at the second advisory committee meeting. Because really the intent of this list is to come up with projects that hopefully at the top are more or less ready to be implemented and shouldn't require much further study or evaluation. Okay, so how did this work out? Let's find out. We do have a full project list that is available on the project website, but for the next 3 slides, I'm just going to kind of cover some of the highlights because, well, I thought it would be kind of boring if I just walked through a list of, 25 projects with you, and it might lose you a little bit there. So we put that all up on the website, and more on that in just a little bit. It kind of conveniently worked out a little bit that we were able to break the list into thirds. And the top third, projects that were at the top of the list, generally speaking, were in the village area. And those consisted of completing sidewalks, some streetscape, enhancing crosswalks or new crosswalks, making them safer. And there's also kind of the unique project of the Champlain Path concept that would examined looking at building a shared use path alongside the existing rail line. That is an example of something that, while it's in the top third, it's definitely not ready to go. It would require further study. But most of the other ones, I think you'll see on the project list if you dive into it, that those are ready to seek funding and move forward into a design process. The kind of middle third projects, we're kind of like just outside the village area, and really were those paths and bike lanes that kind of either connect to the village area or go across town. So mostly just shared use paths and crosswalks and bike lanes that were sort of just outside the village area. And then kind of a unique one there was the Bay Road bridge replacement that ranked in this middle third. And that was part of a previous scoping study. In the bottom third, this kind of last tier of projects are ones that most likely require a little bit further study before they can move forward. And they, generally speaking, were a little bit further outside the village. A fair amount of bike lanes fell into this category. There's a wayfinding project that fell into this bracket. And there's also a mini roundabout at the Falls and Marset Road intersection. Okay. The goal for tonight is really to start to get your feedback and navigate you to the project website, which I think Brian can pop into the chat, where we have this presentation, the maps that we just walked you through, the prioritized list, which you can kind of see on just an example snapshot of it on the left there. And we have 2 options for getting comments that you'll see on the website. One is just if you just have kind of general comments and you just want to give us a quick, yeah, I think this meets the mark, or no, not so much. And then there's another option where we're using this new comment tool called Conveo, and you can if you click on it, it'll open up the actual prioritized list, and it'll allow you to put your comments in there. And it'll be my first time trying it out, so I'm kind of interested to see how it goes. What I think is neat about it is that you can put your comments in, and then if you go back, you can see what your neighbors put for comments. So it's kind of like a community comment area. And then, let's see. Yep. Thanks, Brian, for sharing that. And then last slide before we just open it up for general comments. Next steps, we're hoping to get your feedback by the end of the next week. If it's something where you think you need more time, you can always email me. My email address is on the project website. And then like I said, end of June, maybe by mid-July, we're hoping to have a draft final report available, and get that in front of the select board, kind of get their feedback on it. And taking into account summer vacations and whatnot, it's expected that sometime, I would hope by September, we'd have an actual final report together at the latest. With that, I think I'm gonna open it up. I'll stop sharing for the time being and open it up for comments, questions. You can, I think, raise your hand. I'd be happy to. Robily, did I pronounce your name right? I apologize if not.
Yes, thank you, Jason. That was perfect. Robily rhymes with wobbly.
Got it.
I just want to be clear. We can pass that link along to folks who aren't here tonight, because I know there are a lot of other people that care greatly, and I'm surprised not to see them all on tonight. As you said, I was out bicycling today too, a gorgeous day to be out. So we can just pass this link and let them know that they can provide feedback up until June 3rd. Is that correct?
Yes, and thank you for the question. I forgot to make mention that we will be sending out a blurb on Front Porch Forum. I have it on my list to get Adele a quick little blurb to distribute. So you should hopefully see that go out on Front Porch Forum. But in the meantime, you're definitely welcome to send that out and pass along.
Wonderful, thank you.
It'll be on the website as well, the town website.
Where would it be on the town website, Adele, just to be sure I can spot it?
When you first open it, it should be there's a calendar. There's a calendar, but above the calendar, there's sort of highlights. So it would be there.
Okay, great. I know that we have several different wonderful bike and walking groups. So as I was trying to find this evening's second session, I found I was a little bit lost looking at the other listings. And so it's great that we have so many people interested and caring. I just want to be sure I can point people to where they can provide feedback on this study.
Yeah, great, thank you. Is there any other? I thought I saw another hand go up at one point. Oh, Jane.
Yes, initially I was going to ask a very similar question to Robalie's, but I also just wanted to ask you if can you talk a little bit more about the weighting of the project readiness? You said that kind of came out of the last advisory committee meeting, and I guess since I'm on the advisory committee, I'm a little at a loss about what the discussion was that led to that added criteria, because so I guess that's my question.
Yeah, sure. It just seemed like some of the questions that we were getting about, like, how did projects rank where they did, and there was a question in our debrief that pointed out, and I forget if it was at the meeting or just during our internal conversation, that pointed out some things that ranked high hadn't really gone through any sort of public scrutiny or any sort of public process. So that was just something that jumped out at us that we thought we kind of overlooked as part of the scoring criteria. Michael?
Hi, thanks. I'm curious about um, if there's a way to, I don't know if ranking's the right term, but just compare size of potential projects. So I noticed, for instance, in the various brackets, some of those proposed projects would be huge, relatively speaking. Some would be very small. But was there any way to sort of rank or compare those in terms of, say, cost or scope or intensity of the project?
We did use cost as a factor when giving its score for complexity. So I think that we could include that as like an additional column if you think that would be helpful.
I think I mean in my role as on the select board, it would be
Yeah,
helpful about what's the price tag. Uh,
yeah, that's
yeah,
a good point. I hear you.
thank you.
Jason, you've got Jeff and Tom and Lee.
All right, we'll go with Jeff. Jeff is the top. Michael, I'm going to lower your hand.
Hi, thanks for pulling together the study. Just a little curious and interested, and sounds like the study shifted in its focus and goal as far as connecting people. And early in the presentation, you mentioned that you're looking at growth areas and where like the village, the village, which has been, it historically has been the original growth area of Shelburne, and there are some long-term goals where growth is occurring. But I'm still interested in, and maybe it's buried in the report, but I'm interested in some where these studies and areas to connect, addressing current needs, specifically areas of Shelburne that have already been built, between when the historic village was built and current days. I think I guess I'm trying to get at is that there's a large area of Shelburne and a large population, and I'd like to see how some of these various options, what the number of people are that they serve.
Did I understand you? You're interested in how the projects relate to, I guess, the density of Shelburne residents? Is that?
Well, and I guess I'd like to see projects that are built to serve current Shelburne residents and not necessarily projects that are built to benefit Shelburne resident, growth that hasn't occurred yet, or continue to, build further improvements in areas of Shelburne that have already seen many improvements. I guess I thought that the study was going to target areas of improvements that can be made to underserved areas of Shelburne.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, I think if I could just jump in, it turned out that it was trying to figure out what the public that participated, how they ranked the projects. Connectivity actually was one of the highest ranking in terms of importance to everybody. I think you raised a good point about what gets connected, and the growth area just meant there's two growth areas, and that first one is the village center. It's a good question that needs to, we could keep. So this looked at the studies the projects that were already done, studies that were done, and ranked all those recommendations so that we could utilize the work that had been done. If there's a missing link, like you say, maybe there's more connectivity to places that aren't being mentioned, then that becomes something that we put, to look into. Why wasn't it? Why didn't it come up? Or just make sure that gets addressed going forward. Jason, do you agree?
Yeah, I would say if you're looking at some of the maps, where we have all the improvements that we pulled out of the previous plans shown graphically, if you see a missing link or an area that you feel like should be served by a project or an improvement, we would definitely want to know about that, so that we can kind of put it in the list of in the report as an area for future study, so that we can get something on the books.
Thank you.
Sure. Tom, you're next.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I put this into the chat and I'll just read it, my question. Your thoughts about statistical validity of the survey and the weighting of project criteria. I know from our previous forum, there was some question about the number of respondees in relation to the number of residents in town. And I wonder if there are any questions or concerns in your mind about how valid the survey results are in terms, and your use of those survey results and weighting the criteria.
Yeah, it's not statistically significant. Or just totally put that out there. I'm not trying to claim that it's a representative sample of Shelburne by any means. I think we use the survey as best we could to come up with a way to score and prioritize things.
Mm-hmm.
I think where I'd like people to try to focus on is looking at the list and giving us feedback as to whether or not that makes sense. I think that's kind of at the end of the day what we're striving for is a list that, the majority of Shelburne residents think makes sense and comes pretty close to hitting the mark of where their priorities lie. And if not, we need to hear about that so that we can see if we can make some adjustments to how things were scored and ranked.
Okay. I'll just take advantage of the fact that I have, I'm unmuted right now. If I could just address that particular question.
Sure.
The issues, I'm part of the Village Pedestrian Safety Group, and we've been speaking for some time now about our concerns, in particular about Upper Falls Road. In particular, from at least the pump station right all the way north to the light at Harbor Road, Route 7. As a lot of people know, when you're walking along that stretch, you're within several feet of cars, no curb, no green space. And it presents an unpleasant path into and out of the village. And I know you've relied on, to some extent, on some studies, but I do need to voice my concern about that entire stretch of road, which lacks any real protection for pedestrians trying to get in and out of town.
Okay. Just a quick response. I did see that the Falls Road streetscape study ranked in the top third. I don't think this addresses the entire portion of Falls Road that you're interested in.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe a question back to you is, do you think that Falls Road streetscape should be ranked in the top third? And I want to say the answer is yes, based on your comments.
But... without a doubt.
Okay.
And I think I can speak for our group, and I think a lot of residents who've spoken with us about how fearful they are of having their kids access that sidewalk to go to and from school. And a number of people have told us they drive their kids to school because they do not want their kids riding their bike, walking to school along that road. It's a major concern of mine and others.
Okay. Thanks. Other comments, questions? Lee, going the old-fashioned route, go for it, and then we'll go to Jessica after that.
Thanks. Picking up on Micah Shu's suggestion about the potential helpfulness or usefulness of readiness and cost, and that will be very valuable as we launch the conversation about potential use of ARPA funds for town infrastructure improvements,
Good point.
which might well include some bike ped connectivity projects. And since there are timeframes associated with obligating those funds and using those funds, I think that will be a helpful criterion to feed into that conversation. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for supporting that. Jessica.
Hi, I had one comment and then a follow-up question that's sort of bigger picture. And the comment is related to some conversations that we've had in different groups, but I'm also hearing in this conversation here, which is just about sort of highest priority and talking about the village and talking about connecting a lot of the unsafe gaps. And I've seen Route 7 listed in the top third. And while I don't think anyone would argue that a lot of work could be done to increase the pedestrian and bicycle safety and friendliness of Route 7, it will always be Route 7. So if there's a way to indicate that having more pedestrian and bicycle friendly infrastructure adjacent to Route 7 could be a way to really get some safe streets in there for people going to school, people going to shop, as opposed to Route 7. So that's just a sort of bigger comment related to a lot of the different rankings. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that or if I should just go ahead with another question. Yeah.
Could I just get you to maybe clarify a little bit? Are you asking or you're suggesting that that you'd prefer something that's, I guess, well separated from Route 7 versus a sidewalk with only maybe a 5-foot green belt?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a bigger question comes along with, well, okay, if everything can't happen and only a few things are going to happen, how significantly will those few things impact the way that people feel when they're biking and walking in Shelburne? And if more resources go into Route 7, because it's a bigger street and it's in the top third in this group, from what I could tell from how the ranking sort of panned out, I'm not sure that that will be as realistically effective in helping people feel safer when they're walking and biking in the village.
Okay.
If I had the choice of where I wanted to walk or bike, Route 7 or Falls Road, with my kids especially, I would definitely choose Falls Road, even if there's a bike lane on Route 7, which might be fairly obvious, but it's just since one of them is in the top third pretty clearly and maybe the other aren't quite as clear, I just wanted to voice that. Okay,
I follow you now. Thanks, I appreciate it.
Okay,
and I
sorry
think
if that was a little convoluted.
no, that's okay. All good discussion. Helpful just to understand. And I think you may have had another question.
Yeah, so
or
sort of
comment?
related to this in terms of this project and then what that means and what next steps are. There are many projects that have been brought up with this study, even just in the top third, there are, a bunch of things. And I'm wondering if maybe the town could speak or you could speak to what type of projects we might be able to count on in the future and what the timeline of those might be or how this impacts that or kind of what next after the study.
I think I might shy away from that one since it seems more appropriate for the town to answer, if that's fair.
I thought I'd try.
Adele, Lee, you don't know?
Oh, well, I want to hold that question off for one sec, because I think that, well, I'll start with that. I think that once we get the study done and we see the cost and readiness, I think that we'd be better able to answer that question about timeline and counting on, because the whole purpose of the study was readiness for implementation. So I think that's the short answer to that question. But I wanted to circle back to something that Jeff said when you talk about Route 7, which I've dubbed Main Street. There are projects, some big housing projects that are going to be happening. And so in terms of less served communities, I just want to sort of kind of remind people that the people on there on parts of Main Street that are up towards South Burlington, by putting some attention to that, that's actually doing what I think it was Jeff raised about underserved communities needing more connectivity. but the other thing too is not to underestimate the value of streetscape, whether it's trees, furniture, all kinds of things. That also helps to not just make it a nicer place to be, but it is also a traffic calming device. So it's not just, it's a toolkit that together is pretty powerful. So I just wanted to mention those two things.
Okay, great. Thanks for covering that. Much appreciated. Next up on my list is Jane.
My comment is going to build a little bit off of what Jessica was talking about. And I hesitated to some extent because I'm not sure that this is the place for it. But I think since this study changed its focus at some point from what I think people expected to be a more what's on the ground right now to looking at old studies. And I have to say that I've been a huge proponent of looking at the studies we have and not just letting them gather dust on the shelf. We had the opportunity some years back to do that, so at least we're doing it now. But I do think that at some point, the town officials and those of us who are very interested in this topic are going to have a difficult discussion around, okay, so now that we have kind of the information from the past, what's current? What do we need right now? And this, I think this builds some on what Jeff was saying and Jessica was saying, that's not just about what the readiness based on old studies, but what's the current need? And I may be shooting myself in the foot because a lot of the things that rose to the top are the things that our group has been working on for almost 6 years now. So I'm happy about that. But I do think there's going to be, at the end of this process, there's going to be a missing piece that we're going to have to figure out what next and how do we pull this together with, what we know from the past and what is currently going on. And that's more of a comment than a question, and just wanted to put it out there. So thank you.
Could I pull on that thread just a little bit? So I'm just trying to understand what you're getting at. Do you think that at the end of this, you'll be missing the projects that aren't thought of yet, that still need to be thought up and examined and then prioritized? Like they're not even on this list to begin with? Is that what you're saying?
It could be, but it also could be, I think, at the very beginning, we talked about a site visit and really looking at what's the current conditions. And the current conditions may be different than what a 2014 scope and sequence of the village by the intersection at Harbor and Falls Road. I mean, that condition is still bad and needs attention, but I just think that it's possible that we're missing some things, and I don't know what those are, but our group has tried to stay current. I mean, our group is focusing on the village, so as I said, we're very interested in the things that will promote what we've been working on. But I do think, and I think this is what maybe Jeff was getting at, there may be it's possible there are some missing pieces about what's currently going on the ground.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Thank you.
Could I
Appreciate it.
just jump in, Jason, real quick, because
Okay.
there's two things. There is a piece that talked about missing gaps. That was an important piece of the study, that missing gaps have a priority, which kind of covers what you said. But we also did spend time looking at existing conditions of where, like Paul has just done repairs and shoulders. So there is an element of updating existing conditions that was part of the mapping and stuff. So that is in there. And the gap piece is in there. So if that wasn't clear, that those were elements of what people prioritized.
Mike?
I just wanted to weigh in a little bit on the what next piece. I mean, the origins of the study were really trying to weigh the various needs that we have. I think the select board felt we just have a lot of needs, and our rate of accomplishing these pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure improvements is falling way below the rate of our growth in the need. So, so I think, yeah, we have some tough decisions to make, and but this information is going to be very helpful. It doesn't preclude the kind of conversations the town needs to have about prioritizing. And of course, you know, not to be crass, but it really does come down to what can we afford, and when will we be able to afford it, and how. So, and I will say, of course, I mean, when I looked at some of these studies, from some of them were almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I thought, well, you know, that was 20 years ago. So, you know, our needs are constantly changing, and they will continue to change. It's not like this study sets in stone what we have to do. It's just giving us information to help us to think about how to make some decisions. But that's really going to be the hard part. How do we, number one, make those decisions, but number two, how do we implement? And so, you know, I just wanted to point that out, that was the whole point of the study, to help us get to this kind of decision-making point where we can start now to implement some of this. So anyway, thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Last closing thoughts, questions? I don't want to. Otherwise, we can call it. Can set you free. And Tom? Oh, I think you just muted yourself as you were about to speak.
My apologies. Hi.
Hey.
You know, there are a number of projects here that are identified that really fall into the lap of VTrans, and things that really that Shelburne has little control over, because this is really a state highway, and we do not really call the shots when it comes to infrastructure right along and on Route 7. So in some way, perhaps you should be factoring that in any kind of prioritization. It's a question, I guess, but I've been left wondering, okay, what do we do about that? Because VTrans needs to call the shots on these things.
They do. You're right. It is their roadway. With that being said, you can work with us, the CCRPC, to help you out in terms of, getting these projects on some sort of prioritization list in VTrans eyes.
Yeah.
And I think, the Falls Road, Harbor Road, US 7 intersection improvements, those are, on their radar already. And I don't know if they're able to implement some of those as part of the paving project.
Yeah, I don't think there are any plans regarding that particular intersection that I've been made aware of. Maybe Lee can talk about that.
I believe that improvements to Harbor Road, Route 7 are actually in the transportation improvement plan that I just saw Christine put out for several years out.
Yep.
So it is programmed through the VTrans and Regional Planning Commission process for a fairly significant overhaul.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate the comments and questions. Keep them coming through the means of public input that we discussed tonight. Just if you could navigate to the website, that's where you'll find everything. And yeah, please share them. And like I said, you should see that out on Front Porch Forum coming up pretty soon. Adele, looks like you have some closing thoughts.
Just to remind Brian, he was going to make an announcement.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And appreciate everyone joining the call tonight and offering up these good comments. I've been taking notes over here, which I'll compare with what Jason and Adele have. what Adele is inviting me to share is that the Regional Planning Commission is in the process of updating the regional active transportation plan, basically the long range walking and biking plan for Chittenden County. And so we are letting people know that project is happening. The consultant has been doing some analysis in the background using different data layers and data sets, but I am currently in the talking to people mode, much as we're doing right now. I'm going to drop the project website in the chat so you can visit that. The things I would like to hear from you and others, and there's two ways to do this. You can email me with any barriers that you find. I know we're really deep into Shelburne right here, but if you pull back and think of, as you access other communities, what sorts of walking and biking barriers or challenges you face, what your desired connections are, those are the kinds of things that we're looking to hear. Again, you can email me. I'm going to put this in the chat. There is an online map that you can drop pins on and draw lines that we've created. I would caution you not to like zoom in and say, well, this isn't really that type of facility that you identify. It's just a platform for us to gather your information there. So maybe you've seen this across Front Porch Forum, but again, feel free to be in touch with me or Jason about this. And thank you for your work on this current project and at the higher level countywide.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Well said. And thank you everyone for joining us. Lee, was that a hand or a wave? Okay, just a wave. Got it. Okay. Didn't want to cut you off. But yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great night, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Jason, do you want to hang in?
Sure.